Welcome back into another episode of George in the Jungle, presented as always by Remington Tavern and Cincy Light, as we are coming at you live from the Cincy Light Studios. Remington Tavern can be found at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. You can check them out on Instagram at Remitav Cincy. That's REMITAV Cincy with a Y. Or follow them on Facebook. And while you're there, grab an ice cold Cincy Light on tap. Quench that thirst. All right, George.
Yes, sir.
It's been a week since we did this. Let's do it again. Since we last talked, Big 12 Media Days today, they kicked off, and Cincinnati was on the podium. Scott Satterfield was on the podium. It was Coach Speak 101, which should come as no surprise. It's the best team he's ever had. Look, you're in year 3. It should be the best team you've ever had. If it's not the best team you've ever had in the best conference you've ever coached in, that would be an issue. But he's saying and doing all the right things that you're supposed to do. He was asked, I don't know if you knew this or not, he was asked about the transition from his visor to a hat. He simply said, yes, it was intentional. That was it. That's why you ask open-ended questions, not closed-ended questions. There was I haven't yet gotten to watch the player breakouts or even Scott's breakout with Keegan. I did read the articles with that Keegan wrote for the for Scott Satterfield and from John Cunningham. Chad and I did a nightcap tonight about the revenue share that came up, as Scott Satterfield essentially was saying that football is not getting 70% like many other schools in the conference are getting. And basketball is getting a little bit more than some of the other schools essentially around the conference. So as you're trying to compete with largely your conference, could potentially be an issue for football this year. We will see. It doesn't sound like it's a ton. We're maybe talking about 5%, which would equate to about $1 million. But outside of that, again, just largely just a lot of coach speak. Best offensive line that there may be in the country. Talks of how important it was to have both Dante and Joe Royer come back, as they were guys who could have left for the draft. And both of them being Cincinnati guys, it's almost that much more important that they came back to this school, that they get to wear their city across the chest. But yeah, you've gone to these things. What's it like being a member of the media when you go to these media days?
I can't think of one I ever went to where you weren't treated like a king as the media. I mean, I actually love these things, these events like this where you have access to all these players and players from other teams, coaches from other teams, and the craziest stuff gets asked. But I mean, that's kind of the time to do it because, you're looking ahead to the season and there's a lot to talk about with what's left over and any hangover or any excitement from the previous year. There's a million different topics that can be brought up, and usually the subjects are a lot looser than what they are during the season or even when they start training. I mean, it still stays fairly loose, when you get to camp. But once you get a week or two out from games, things really tighten up. But those things are always a blast. They usually have some events for the media or some, let's just say, a lot of free food, sometimes free beer, sometimes free drinks. The ones I went to were a lot of fun. And yeah, if you go down there and don't find a way to hit, I never got to go to the one in the old Big East where they had the crab bake, and everyone who went to that raved about it. They'd have a big golf outing and then this clam bake, I guess they called it, in the evening. And I always heard that was sensational, and I never got to experience that one. But they're all good. They're all fun. And you get access to all these guys, and it's pretty cool. You can pretty much, ask anything you want about anything, and people are pretty darn open at these things. So it's also a signal that, you're ramping up now. You're less than a month away from these guys getting back on the field and getting ready for the upcoming season. So it's just a great way to kick it all off. And I'm glad, in this day and age of, you can do everything on Zoom and whatever, that they still have these gatherings, because that's, in my opinion, a heck of a lot better and certainly a heck of a lot more fun for everyone. And I think even the players would tell you it's a pretty good experience.
Yeah. The last thing I went to that was, I guess, even close to this was going down to the Cotton Bowl since I was in the CFP. I think you and I actually had dinner at the same table.
Boy, what an event that was! I mean, the Cotton Bowl put on a show, man.
Yeah,
that top notch.
The two meals, as you get one meal before the game and one meal at halftime, completely different meals.
Yes, it was crazy, and it was I don't know. They've got great sponsors. I forget who sponsored that now. I should remember this. They had a big title sponsor, a big company, but my God, that thing was that was top notch. That was probably, out of all the collegiate events, that thing was probably the best run, the most perks, everything else for the media. I couldn't believe, because nobody really does that with the media like they used to. They felt like they had to, and you'd get those courtside seats or, all this stuff. And a lot of that got taken away in the interest of, why are we letting these guys sit courtside when we can charge $1,000 a game for these things, right? It made no sense. So schools started doing that. But those media days and that Cotton Bowl, there was nothing skimped on at all. It was fantastic.
Completely different dessert areas for like a whole different dessert spread at the beginning of the game and again at halftime when they brought out like the nachos and all that. It was just unbelievable. The food was unbelievable.
It's funny. We've got a comment about the mock turtle soup, and so I wish I could tell. I probably had, let's think out loud here. 30. I had 30 plus years of mock turtle soup at the Bengals. The Bengals do this pre-training camp luncheon for the media, and it's great. This started with Paul Brown way back when, before I started, and they had it at the Cincinnati Club. Now they have it at Paycor Stadium in one of the club areas, and they always serve mock turtle soup, which I think it's just beef and mock turtle soup. It's not real turtle, but they make it kind of taste like a turtle soup, and it's actually okay. And that is called the mock turtle soup luncheon every year, and everyone laughs about it, looks forward to it, and you go, and Mike Brown speaks there. You can interview him. He's sitting at a table, and the media. It's like a media day for the Bengals. Is what it is, and they have all the assistant coaches. You can hit both the coordinators. Darren Simmons is usually there talking as well. Zach will be there. Mike Brown's there, and you get to interview these guys and talk about the upcoming season, what's going on going in the training camp, the offseason, anything you want to ask. Usually there's news comes out of the Bengals media day because someone invariably asks Mike Brown about something, whether it's the stadium deal, whether it's, player contracts, something. And he'll usually say something that makes what we call front page news. But yeah, it's the Bengals have kind of their own media day, like what's going on with the Big 12. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, you can get a lot of stuff out of there. But I've seen guys. I remember one time I saw an interview from the media day being used in like November. Someone was still using some of that material. I didn't do it, but I know someone very well who did. So yeah, those things are a lot of fun, and I hope everyone in the UC party's having a bang up time at this Big 12 event.
Yeah, I agree. What do you make of Scott Satterfield talking about the football program not getting as much as maybe some of their peers around the conference? Now you got to figure there's some other schools out there when you look at some big basketball schools, like, because they all have the same cap. Every school has the same cap here. So maybe when you're looking at, I don't know, Kansas and Arizona or Baylor, maybe they're doing the same thing where they're investing a little bit more into basketball, as it's traditionally been a powerhouse for basketball. So just curious to get your thoughts.
It's, man, it makes me feel like they think basketball needs a little more help, right? That's what it feels like to me. And basketball is a big deal at Cincinnati. It really is. And you got to get this right. And you're going into a season that I feel like is totally make or break for Wes.
Absolutely.
And, they're giving him all the help they can. And, on paper, yes, he's got what looks like the makings of a team that should make the tournament and maybe win some games in it. We'll see how it all comes together. You never know till they're out there playing. But it's a little surprise. I mean, you don't want to put your football program behind the 8 ball if you can help it. And I hope this doesn't, but it sounds like, they were probably asked to cut a corner or two and maybe go without a thing or two. I don't know. Maybe it just fell that way, but it sounds to me like if he brought that up, then there was some intent behind it, probably to help basketball.
Yeah, I wonder if it's just simply the situation where you have Wes, who's kind of on his last leg here. You have a situation where he hasn't had great success over the course of his tenure here, and if things were a little different, where Scott instead was on his second to last year of his contract rather than Wes in that situation, maybe things go a little bit differently. And we're talking only about $1 million if we're talking 5%, which again is the number that Chad had kind of put out there, but he was still working on vetting that information. So I don't want to speak out of turn for Chad. But yeah, I mean, when you're talking about $1 million, you're talking about an entire roster spot for basketball, whereas in football, I don't know. Are you talking about the whole special teams room, perhaps, or
Right.
I mean, that's a little bit different than $1 million. When you're talking, the roster spots for football, it's a little different than these, 12 or so spots in basketball.
And I wish I was a little more privy to the timing of it all and when you figure that out. And
he mentioned that. He said they try and figure out their budgets. They've been working on this since January 1 for the budget that is essentially going to be in place for the year starting on July 1.
So that makes me think.
Cunningham mentioned that, by the way.
You think about it. So, maybe one of those guys that popped in the portal, they thought, what the hell, we can go get this kid and it helped basketball a lot by getting him, but we're going to have to, cut football a little short. And maybe they felt good about where they were in football and with it maybe, there wasn't somebody in the portal they had to have or whatever. Now you don't know going forward in December what's going to be sitting there.
And that's
but
if you're
had a
setting
hand situation in basketball and they had to go for it.
If you're setting these budgets in January and you're, working through that, you have essentially the end of the football portal, the first football portal, and you also have the spring portal looming. You have men's basketball portal in its entirety, women's basketball portal in its entirety, baseball portal in its entirety. So there's a lot of portals before that July 1 deadline,
right,
that you have to work through and have all this money set aside for and figured out. So I don't know. It's an interesting conversation. I'll be curious to see if any of this stuff gets Freedom of Information acted out to where we find out what dollars are being spent where. I'm not going to be the one to be doing anything like that.
Kind of set, and then you've got, oh my God, there's Miller sitting out there that you can grab, and it's one of those deals like, we can really help our team. You know what I mean? Like, do you pass that up and say, we're going to go get a couple of returners for the special teams or a punter or something? No. I can see some logic in this.
Also, don't let it be lost on the fact that you still had the end of the NIL collectives. So you still had collective money that you could play with prior to that, end of June, early July time frame. So you could have done something more with some of that than maybe what you're doing with the revenue share portion now, and that'll
Right.
largely be what it is, the main source of income, you would think, going forward. So I don't know. I'm just very curious to see how this all plays out, and having it a coach speak just out loud about it is during media days is maybe a little. I didn't know Scott Satterfield had that in him.
That's that. Well, and I got to go back and listen to it all. I hope he's not making excuses in advance. You know what I mean? I don't want to hear any excuses in advance. You got to work with what you got, and he, everything I've seen out of him, he seems like a reasonable guy, and maybe gets it where they're at right now. But I don't know a coach ever that hasn't wanted everything. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I mean, I would love to see the AD go in and tell Bob Huggins that, hey, you're not going to be able to spend this because we're going to spend it over here. The roof would blow off the place. So, and I'm sure Scott probably he wouldn't have brought it up if it didn't bother him, I don't think, right?
Well, you want to feel like you're on an even playing field, and I totally get that. So if he doesn't feel that way, then it makes sense. But to air that publicly in the pretty much the first opportunity you get to do so just seems a little out of character for a guy who seems largely the type of personality that's, oh, gee, golly shucks.
Right. And so obviously, it bothers him. I'm sure it does. And then when you see Texas Tech throwing the money around that they apparently are throwing around, I mean, they got the 1 5-star committed for this year, and then they got the other one they're working on next year. That's an edge guy, and they got the offensive tackle for the upcoming class. That's a big deal. I mean, it's no secret you win with talent at the college football level, and recruiting is huge, and obviously the portal's huge, and getting good players out of there. You gotta have the horses, and maybe this was a plea for help, and I don't know how it all shakes out now and how this works. I'm glad I don't have to figure it out, but it sounds to me like he's at least raising his hand saying help, because he's going to need it. Because really, if you think about it, if things don't go very well or well enough on the football field this year, he's in the same seat Wes is right now.
Well, and if you're firing both coaches, I mean, the elephant in the room at that point would be John Cunningham.
Correct.
Correct.
And it's in his interest to make this work, right?
Absolutely. You wouldn't expect him to have to fire both big hire coaches that he's brought in for both the men's basketball and football, fire them and keep his job to make the next hire. None of that makes any sense.
No,
I'm with you.
It's going to be interesting to watch this play out and see where football is. Obviously, their schedule is not really among the toughest in the Big 12 this year, so they've got an opening to do fairly well. A lot of it's going to depend on those wide receivers they brought in, Sorsby making better decisions. Hopefully that line's as good as Scott thinks it is, because they've got some good running backs. They've got, I have no problem with them leaning on the running game. I mean, when you look at some of the decisions that were made at critical times last year, that would be a very good thing if they have a very reliable running game. And hopefully that shakes out. But, it's going to be a fun season again. It's going to be very interesting because, like last year, I'm not sure how good or how bad they're going to be. I don't know. Is Sorsby going to take that next step and be better with the ball and a better decision maker? Sometimes he looked fantastic, and then other times, like the West Virginia game, you see that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we will see, but we all certainly are hoping for the same thing. I think in him making that next step, I think that'd be monumental for this team's success this season.
Yeah, and good for them to be able to retain a lot of those guys they retained. And you brought up, Rory and Royer and Dante coming back is huge. And then just the development of the guys around them too. And hopefully, we see some development with some of these younger guys because they've done a pretty good job of retention for the most part. It seems like the guys you want to keep, they have kept. There's a couple exceptions, but every team's going to have those. But I think they've done a pretty good job retaining the guys you would like to see stay.
I agree. I don't know that there was anybody that left last season that I was terribly upset about, as opposed to these guys at the top that they have made sure that they've kept around.
I see in the comments in the South that turtle soup's called cooter soup. That doesn't sound good to me.
Moving on. Since our last show, the Reds, they have not been the same Reds that we were so excited about a week ago. Against the Red Sox, they did not get swept. They managed to eke one out at the end of the series there, taking the final game of the series 8-4. They played the Phillies. They dropped 2 of 3 to the Phillies, and now they're getting their asses handed to them by the Marlins. Not just yesterday, 5-1 was bad enough. Tonight, it is bottom of the 8th, and they are down 11-1, George.
Brutal. So 1 run again. So that's Tuesday, Monday, Sunday, Saturday. They've scored 1 run in each of those games. So the offense is back in a coma. The starting pitching was abysmal tonight. It hasn't been great through this stretch. Here's the deal. I thought about this morning that they are an average, if not barely above average team. And that's probably giving them something. It's average. And they're going to be hanging on the fringes of this wild card. Don't know if they'll get there or not. But it's just, I just feel like it's not coming together. Now, a 10-game winning streak would change that. But I don't see that in them. I just, they were really starting to play good baseball there. And then you see a game like last night, and it's like, my God, do these guys pay attention to what's going on? Do they care what's going on? I'm sure they do. But it's just, that was such a lackluster effort all the way around that, and then you go out tonight and get your butt kicked. And it's the Marlins, and they played better lately. I think this will be like their 11th straight win on the road, which it is pretty impressive, but this shouldn't be happening to the Reds if they really believe they're good enough to be in that mix to make the playoffs. And like I said, they'll probably be kind of in the picture and hang around, but I'm not feeling real good about any kind of good second half run here for this team.
I have been loudly against I've wanted the Castellinis to spend more money on this team, and that's not a secret. When we have talked, that's usually where I am, and how you fix this team. Now that said, I am going to argue myself and say that the Reds also have a problem in spending the money on the wrong players. You cannot, when you are not a team that is going to spend a lot of money, you cannot afford to miss and miss badly when spending a lot of money. So if you do, you can maybe miss one. You can't miss a bunch.
No.
So you missed on Jeimer Candelario, which, again, we've talked ad nauseum about that. I don't really even want to get into it again, but we were confused when they signed him. Still confused on that signing. Doesn't sit well with me at all. You're on the hook for that contract this season and next season, and he's your top paid player this season, at least until there's a player paid more than him. He will remain your top paid player this season and next season. Nick Martinez is your second highest paid player on this team.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I love that. He's been great at times. He's been a guy that you can lean on at times. But there have been It feels like the bad has outweighed the good with Nick Martinez. If
I would have to agree.
If he's a reliever, then put him in relief, which I think that's where he's, in my opinion, that's where he's fared his best. He's been a spot starter, which we've needed him to be at times, but out of the pen is where he has served this team the best. And if you're spending $21 million on a guy who is giving you ace type stuff out of your pen, great. But if you were spending $21 million for a guy to be your number 3, I don't love it. I don't love it. And he's not a reliable 3.
Right. No, I mean, when you look at it that way, and this is a guy I was kind of hoping if he had a couple more good starts and all that he could be some bait at the deadline, because earlier this year he was pitching pretty darn well, and it's like, I'm thinking, good God, he's definitely pitching better than the back of his baseball card. So move him if you got a chance. And they probably didn't with that kind of money tied to him. But now they're not going to probably be able to move him for anything. I mean, maybe somebody will take him on at the deadline. But you're not going to get what you could have earlier, and you're certainly not going to get $21 million worth out of it. Or whatever the hell's left prorated for the season. So it's when you miss on those top 2 paid guys like that with a team like the Reds, it's going to hurt you. You miss on one, really, and it hurts you, because they don't have the money to throw around like these other teams, nor do they. And you start thinking they've got some good players in the minors that are coming up, but you can't rush them. And we've been saying that for years too, because they never are able to supplement those guys with stable veterans that can come in and hit the damn ball consistently. And so I don't know. I'm bummed out about it. I'm not holding out a lot of hope for the rest of the season. And there's plenty of time, and they can get on a run. But I just don't think it's there. I just don't think it's there.
You are relying.
You look at how wrecked the rotation is right now. Yeah. Hunter Green with a setback. Hopefully Chase Burns can, continue to throw fairly well. He had the one really bad outing that was bizarre. I guess maybe he was tipping pitches. He's got to get the walks down, but I mean, he's going to have to be a viable option for them the rest of the year to compete. And if he's not, they're in big trouble.
And you're pretty much wondering if Brett Lauder can come back as well, because you very well may need him to finish this season.
He had a setback a little bit ago with that oblique. Yeah. I don't know when he's going to be back. I don't think we'll see him. Will we see him in August? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, the same with Hunter Green. I mean, I was hoping he could make it back at the end, after the All-Star break, but after he had reported that he had soreness after the last bullpen session in that groin, how far out is he? Another month or more?
I guess I just look at this roster and I wonder, were you really hoping to lean on Jeimer Candelario, Jose Trevino, Tyler Stevenson, I guess, Gavin Lux, I guess, Austin Hay? Like, these guys are still young.
Right.
Even the guys that I just mentioned, most of them are still young. So where was your veteran leadership on this team? You're legitimately just Jeimer Candelario. I think is the only one of those guys that I mentioned that's over 30.
Yeah. I don't know. They certainly don't have it, and they don't have it in terms of quality veterans, really.
No, I guess going back to what I was talking about when I brought up the contracts, when Candelario and Martinez, and I guess you could potentially even throw Rogers into that conversation as well. He's been okay, but you have to hit and hit well when you are spending money on big contracts. If you're a team that does not spend money on 10-figure contracts.
Well, yeah. And obviously they thought McLean might pick up where he left off. That he had the home run tonight. But and they moved him back around. I mean, he was fine at the bottom of the order and seemed. I wish he would have stayed there a little longer. And who knows if that's what it is. It may not have mattered, but at the same time, please let him have, a month and a half of success before you throw him back in more of a pressure situation up in the lineup. I don't know, man. It's very disappointing the way they're playing, and this last week's been disappointing, and the inability to score consistently. It feels like it's every year.
Well, I think that's what happens when you are largely relying on guys who have not even hit arbitration yet. I think that if you're going to continue to look at the farm as your saving grace rather than find the bat that you need, move a couple pieces in. Your farm is great right now. Great. Move a couple prospects. Don't be afraid to move some prospects to go get a proven guy who can do it for your corner outfield spot. So we've been talking about until we are blue in the face, or a guy
nothing there,
a guy at third base, or a guy at first base, because you pretty much all of your corners are a mess right now because you've drafted literally only center fielders and shortstops for the last 3-4 drafts.
Yeah, and I feel like they got lucky that Hayes was still kicking around really when they got and that's because he was coming off all that weird injury stuff. And I know he still had some, couple issues staying healthy, but when he is, he's definitely a plus for them, a big plus.
How much better would he be with an actual bat around him?
Yeah, exactly. They needed another one.
Yeah.
They didn't just need him, and they went out and really got no big ticket items off the free agent market, or what you would say is, above average ticket item. They didn't even try that I know of. It's just
Trevino has been a blessing.
Yes. And he got healthy. Like, he struggled a little bit with health along the way where he wasn't hitting as well. And that his hitting has been such a surprise. But he's able to do that when he's right. He's not maybe quite at this level, but, he's been more than acceptable. And thankfully he is now, but a lot of good it's doing them when they, don't have enough around people like that.
Stop shopping in the DVD bin.
Yeah.
Not even the Blu-ray bin, but the DVD bin at Walmart.
Yeah. The cassette bin.
It's ridiculous.
It is. And it's not working. It hasn't worked for how long? That year who'd they bring in with Moustakas, which that was a bad deal too. Was that the Castellanos year? I think they brought him in, Moustakas, and it felt like they were going to do something, and Nick had that out, of course. But that's fine if you got to give him that to get him here, and maybe you're able to convince him or up the ante a little and keep him. But they didn't try any of that this time around, really, nothing.
Would have been great if they had been able to keep Nick Castellanos here, because that would have solved your issue for a corner outfielder, and you wouldn't have had the Heimer Candelario contract.
Right.
I digress.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And while, is he the be all end all? No, but he's really a heck of a lot better than what they've been dealing with.
And he would have been a veteran presence and a guy in the clubhouse to show people how to do this day in and day out and give it your all. Because say what you want about Nick Castellanos, but he is a guy who goes out there and puts everything on the line every day.
He wants a win. He wants to win. And that's part of the reason I think he got the hell out of here.
He also said that the Reds never talked to him. They never even tried to re-sign him. They never called.
I don't get it. They didn't want to spend the dough. Let's just say it like it was. They didn't want to say, they didn't care that he had that out to leave.
Too much personality.
You're either in Major League Baseball or you're not. And I know they can't spend the Phillies payroll, which is what, $259 or something crazy. They can't spend the Dodgers payroll, but they can chunk some more out there than they have. And I know they've been killed at the gate early this year. The weather has been horrific for their attendance. But damn it, you're either in Major League Baseball or you're not. And, if you're going to just bite around the edges, please just sell it and let's bring somebody in who will.
All right. I'm with you, George. Sell the team, Bob.
Yeah, after how many years I've reached that stage? What have they owned that now? Not quite 20, probably. Probably about 18 years they've owned it.
I don't know. That's too long. In any case, Netflix is dropping a new series called Quarterbacks, and it'll be season 2 of this series. Joe Burrow apparently is, I want to say I saw a stat where I think I don't recall how many episodes there were, but he's almost the first, after the opening credits, he's like they go straight to Joe Burrow in nearly every episode. I think there were 2 or 3 that they didn't go to him after the opening credits, as they are following, I want to say 3 or 4 different quarterbacks in this season. So we'll get plenty of Joe Burrow. Some of the clips have started to leak out, and the one that caught my eye more so than any of them, because I saw one where he talked about his house being broken into, or he's talking to Lou Anarumo, and he's talking about, do I need to sell my house? Everybody knows where I live. They know my business. I'm uncomfortable with this. Great. We get to see some personality there. That's fine. But the good clip was when he went to the bench against the Tennessee Titans. They beat Tennessee, I think, by 16 in that game, something like that. He goes to the bench, and Zach goes to console him, and he's like, "No, fuck that. I'm pissed about the win. I'm pissed about eight penalties, offside penalties." And he's
they had
a
bunch of false starts or something in that game. I remember that, because wasn't it like one team had like 13 penalties and the other 11 or 12? There were so many flags in that game. It was something crazy.
Bad. He's pissed though, and Zach's like, all right, I'm gonna go praise the defense. I'll see you, bud.
You remember when this happened, that conversation was caught on the sideline? It looked like he was yelling at Zach, which he kind of was.
I'm so happy we got to hear it though, because he was pissed, and we got to see, like,
I'm glad he was.
He's got that extra tick that Andy Dalton did not have, that Carson Palmer did not have. And that's the thing that I think that we all love about Joe Burrow, is he's going out there and he wants to win, and he wants to dismantle you. He doesn't just want to win. He wants to do it cleanly. He wants to do it without penalties. He wants to do it without being on his back. And he's frustrated. He should be frustrated. He gets hit more than any other quarterback. And we're getting to see it. I don't feel like Joe is out there. He's a lot of quarterback speak, which that's part of the territory. But this gives a glimpse as to who he is on the field, and gives you some of that personality that you don't get to see when he's at a podium behind a microphone.
Right. And I felt like we got some of that in Hard Knocks last year too, the in-season Hard Knocks. And there was one episode where they were at practice and Joe's mic'd up and doing his thing. And the way he was, every play that they showed on the show from this practice, he was critiquing something on every play. Like, Jamar, if you flatten that route out like this, when that guy does that, we got it, wide open there. Or every play, he had something to say to somebody. It could be a lineman. It could be a running back, tight end, wide receiver. It could be himself. And that's what a competitor like that, it is so weird, because it's almost like obviously they want to do anything and everything to win, but they get in this mindset where it's more about the execution. And if you execute well and do everything great, generally you're going to win. But even if you lose, they can kind of accept that and say, we did everything right and did our best. They were just better than us. But they win that game, and he's as mad or madder than if they had lost a game the other way. He was, and I love that, because it's true. They got away with murder down there that day. They could, if Tennessee had a pulse, they would have lost that game. And he knows that. And he doesn't want that to carry over. That's one of those things. He's basically telling his head coach, we got to fix this now. And guess who's the head coach? You got to make sure this crap stops, right? I mean, that's kind of what I took out of that clip.
So after the conversation, they cut to Zach Taylor, who's in one of the meeting rooms, and he's talking about the exchange, and he's like, sometimes they get lost in just the passion of the game and get lost in the game itself, and sometimes you just gotta let them and he's just smiling and happy-go-lucky Zach Taylor.
Well,
it's just such a different dynamic from Joe to him, and it's just funny. Like, I laughed out loud watching it because it just seemed so like these two people have to work together, and I don't know how that works. I truly don't know how that works.
Though. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm probably too easygoing because I'm probably too much like Zach. Because Zach's like, I know you're right. We'll fix it, but enjoy the win. I want you to have some joy because we won. Because it's hard to win. It's hard to win in the NFL. It's hard to win. I don't care what it is. Winning is not easy, and it's you can't just take it for granted. I get that, but I also love the fact Joe was the way he was and knew stuff needed fixed, or there weren't going to be any more wins. And it was an interesting dynamic, but. I think we've all been on teams, or I think back teams I was on, and we obviously we didn't have kids of that caliber or that crazy about it, but I remember there were guys when we would win, but would be honked off. More often than not, it was their own play, not the play, but sometimes it was the play of others, and we got to get our, if this stuff happens again, we're not going to be celebrating next week. So I think look, I would love, you want a quarterback like that. You
Agreed.
Want someone, and to me, I think the last quarterback the Bengals had that would have been that way and that vocal is Boomer.
I agree.
Would have done that.
And
he would walk in and tell Sam, Sam, you're full of it. We stunk today. Yeah, we won, but this better change and this better change. And that's what you want. That's what you want. I'm sure Zach appreciates the heck out of it, but that was funny. Zach's all smiles and goes over to give him a pep talk. Joe wasn't having it.
No.
He basically said, get out of here.
I know. I told you.
I'm out of here.
I laughed out loud, and then then they cut to Zach in that meeting room, and he's just all smiles talking about the passion, and I laughed even harder.
Those aren't out yet, though, right?
Correct.
Okay, because I've got to watch that. I watched last year's. I think they had Kirk Cousins and the kid that got Marcus Mariota. I think Mahomes was part of that, and I forget who the other one was. The Kirk Cousins stuff was pretty interesting, and those are. I'll tell you what, I would have given anything like if we could have had that kind of access and do that stuff. And I mean, that is just such. I hate to put it this way because the people who do those shows, I mean, they do a great job. But it's also you've got such great material with all that behind the scenes stuff. It's shooting fish in a barrel. You can't screw it up.
I just Googled it. It says it releases today. So it may, I don't know what time today it released. But
that's going to be some late night viewing for me then because I'm going to watch it.
Looks like that. Well, between that and NCAA football game came out yesterday at noon. There's plenty of stuff to do. And I got to get these kids back.
Still playing the old game?
Yeah, I got to get these kids back into school, George.
Is there what is the difference? Just the rosters and stuff, or what?
They've made some tweaks to Dynasty. They've made some tweaks to Road to Glory.
Oh, thank God. Then I'll buy it because
and there's still some glitches that they need to iron out, and those should be fixed with the first patch. But they have the real trophies in the game now, where they didn't last year. They have real coaches in the game now. Most of them, there's still like 15 or so that didn't. Like Bill Belichick's not in the game. Dion's not in the game. Trent Dilfer's not in the game. There's like 15 or so coaches that aren't in the game yet. And again, who knows with the first patch when it comes out? There's plenty of players that have not yet been put in the game, whether it's because they did not opt in yet or had not transferred yet or whatever the reason may be. But there should be lots fixed whenever they get the first patch, which is usually a couple weeks after the official release date, which is Friday, I think.
So are you one of the guys that just automatically plays the toughest level? Or because to me, last year, like the last year's game when I did Dynasty, it's too easy on the freshman mode. But then if you bump it up to varsity, it's too hard.
I'll be honest. I do a lot of simming, where I just want to do the recruiting and building the programs, as opposed to the actual gameplay. I don't actually play the games themselves.
Okay.
I will say,
I feel like the recruiting's too hard or too easy in the freshman mode. And I don't know what it's like in the next mode because, I mean, I'm at Kent State and I'm getting 5 stars. Come on.
They've made recruiting a lot harder. I will say that.
I've already experienced that because I just landed maybe 2 or 3 5-stars for next year's class with at UC in my Dynasty last night. So that was cool.
There you go. But yeah, plenty stuff to do this week with the release of that game, and then quarterback season 2, with plenty of Joe Burrow there.
So, yeah, I'm gonna watch that tonight.
Not a whole lot else going on with the Bengals, as there's been no news with Trey Hendrickson, no news with Mark Stewart. So we'll see if we have.
I don't know what's going to happen there. I'm not getting a good feeling at all.
I think all will be fine. I tell myself that because I have had this love-hate relationship with the Cincinnati Bengals my entire life, and I think it'll be okay.
Well, everybody your age does. I mean, you guys, when they came to town and they're in the playoffs 3 years later, and, they had some success in the 70s, made the playoffs a couple times. Paul Brown was coach. Then they went down the toilet. But 2 Super Bowls in the 80s they appeared in. Like, my generation got to see some pretty good times with the Bengals and the Reds. We were so lucky.
I guess the question I'll ask you, though, as we're talking about Trey Hendrickson and Shamar Stewart, between the two of them, I still think both of them will be suited up week 1, no issues. They'll be in camp even. And I say that because when have the Bengals ever let something like this go all the way? They've never, not with Justin Smith, not with anybody.
They did Carson Palmer, but he was just demanding a trade and wasn't going to play.
Well, and I guess you could say that Trey Hendrickson is, in the same boat that Carson was, where he was demanding a trade, but he's demanding a trade and or a contract extension. So it's a little different, but I don't know. Even the Carson thing, I think that Carson hated the city, and rightfully so. He had some shit going on where fans were dumping trash in his front yard and coming by and doing some just not cool things with
no, Carson. That's not good. I heard some of that may have been overblown, but I don't know. That's I probably I don't know. I heard maybe that wasn't quite as big of a deal as somebody made it out to be, but yeah, that stuff shouldn't happen. I remember back in the early 70s, when Dan Devine was the head coach in Green Bay, and somebody, I don't know, they hung his dog or something. I don't know what the hell they did.
Oh my God.
Like, I don't know if it was that bad, but something happened at his house that was not cool. And none of that stuff's cool. I mean, it's freaking games. And I know people lose money on it and stuff, but I'm sorry. If you lose money gambling, you know who that's on? You, not the team you bet on. I'm sorry. It's just like no one's holding a gun to your head saying bet $1,000 on the Bengals to beat the Steelers.
Yep. So I don't know. I'm with you. I'm interested to see how this goes, but I have faith that they'll get it done. Even with the Carson thing, it still worked out for the Bengals because, my goodness, they fleeced Oakland.
Yeah.
Fleeced them.
Thanks to Hugh Jackson.
Yeah. That might be the best thing that Hugh ever did.
That's what people said. But I don't think that's true. I thought, I liked Hugh when he was here, and I know the guys who played for him really liked him too. I think I like Hugh.
The last thing we got to talk about is FC Cincinnati at the top of the table. George, they have
How about that?
they've put it all together. By the way, it looks like the Reds are about to lose 12-1. So Miami did, tack some more runs on. But
That's brutal.
yep. But FC Cincinnati, they are at the top of the table in first place right now. And the hell is real is right around the corner as they will play Columbus on Saturday at 7:30. I believe that game is at home.
That's in Cincinnati, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
They tied up there earlier. They had a 1-1 draw up there earlier in the season in Columbus, and yeah, they get through this one, and then they won't see them again until maybe the playoffs. Boy, this team's playing well though, and they still feel like they have a little more in there, and they do. As far as personnel, as far as a mistake here, a mistake there, but they're in a good spot, and I think they can get a little better. And the guys that they are banking on to provide a spark are providing a spark.
Yeah, they scored 2, and when they took out Chicago last Saturday 2-1, they have won 4 of their last 5, and they're on a roll right now. They pass up Nashville in the rankings. Both, all teams in the top 5 there have played their 21 games.
Miami only played like 17 or something.
I feel like they knew that Messi was going to be
it's so weird,
not quite ready to go, so they just fixed the schedule. They just fixed.
So if they won all 4 of those, then they could actually be in first, but they're probably not going to because that's just so hard to do. But yeah, Cincinnati's in a good spot and playing well, and getting better, and hopefully they save their best for last. Unfortunately, last year they didn't, but and it wasn't terrible, but it just, God, we expected a little more last year. But, the way they're playing and the way they're trending, you hope that they can get in that championship match this year.
If they can continue, final. If they can continue winning, right now you're at 42 points on the table ahead of Nashville with 41, Philly with 40, and Columbus with 38. After that, Orlando's all the way at 34. So they're starting to get some of that separation that we talked about a couple of weeks ago where they had no separation when you're talking about, I think it was 7, 8 different places.
Oh my God. Yeah. It was all bunched up.
Yeah. So they're starting to get some of that separation. And obviously you want to see more of that separation at the top as opposed to one loss or even a draw where, Nashville or Philly's right back there tied or ahead of you on the table. So, but they're continuing. I'm happy they're scoring 2+. I think if they can continue to score 2+ is where you want to be. If you're losing with 2+, you had a bad day at the office. But if they are, because that's not who they've been over the course of the season. They've been holding most opponents to 1 or fewer goals almost all season. So just continue to score 2+, and all should be well. That's the winning formula here. Would love it if the Cincinnati Reds.
Because I hope it's good weather, and because that's going to be that place is going to be rocking with the way this team's playing in Columbus coming in. That is going to be nuts.
Would love it if the Cincinnati Reds could follow that same formula and start to score 2+ per game.
I know. They're at 0-1 right now.
Other than that, George,
they got a late run.
Oh, great! You're going to catch up that
2 runs tonight. Hallelujah!
Yuck!
They're only 10 short of a victory.
I don't have anything else. I don't know if you got anything else here this week, George.
Well, I'm going to go grab a burger and watch some Netflix, I think.
There you go.
Watch a little Joe Burrow anger. Is that in the first episode, or do we know?
I don't know the answer to that. I just know I saw the clip on Twitter and laughed.
Okay. Well, I'll find out.
Well, that's going to wrap things up for us here for this episode of George in the Jungle. Thank you to those who tuned in, and Crypt Keeper for throwing some stuff there in the chat.
Yeah, he had some good stuff.
Thanks to Remington Tavern.
I don't know about that.
Thanks to Remington Tavern for sponsoring this show. You can find them at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. Check them out on Instagram at RemyTavStincy or follow them on Facebook. And thank you to Cincy Light for sponsoring our studios, where we come at you live every week. But be sure to join us back here in the Cincy Light studios next week, 9 p.m., to discuss all of your Cincinnati sports.
Thank you, Aaron.